Welcome. It's really hard to see everybody out there with the lights on, but I hear you out there. So thank you for coming. We appreciate your attendance and attention. My name is Ben Schreiner. I'm the head of AI and Modern Data Strategy Business Development at AWS, and I welcome you to our session. I'll ask my good friend Michael to introduce himself.
Hello, everybody, and thanks for being here. Michael Bachman. I run research at Boomi. This is market, technical, and all things geopolitical research as well. It's a lot of fun, and I've been doing that for quite a bit.
And Barry?
My name is Barry Gertzen. I'm the channel CTO for Boomi. I've been with Boomi for 8 years now, and really excited to be here before you all today.
All right. Let's start with a little audience participation to make sure you're all alive and well here. So if we could pull up the first question, and we'll do a raise hand queue here to see if any of you have an executive mandate. Anyone? Okay, that's probably half. Half? We'll call it half. All right.
Half, yeah.
We're trying to gauge the audience so that we can tailor the messaging at the right altitude for the audience. So bear with us. We've got a couple more questions for you. Any of you deliberately, actually on purpose, using AI or agentic systems at work? Okay.
Awesome.
And anybody that has an agent doing their whole job for them right now? Not yet. All right, good to see. Thank you for laughing, whoever did. That was a joke. And lastly here, if you could, let's raise our hands way up if you're super concerned, halfway up if you're kind of concerned, and if you're not concerned at all, just keep your hands down. All right, we have a level of concern. All right, there we go. All right, that definitely helps us gauge the rest of this talk with our esteemed guest here. All right, I think we can advance.
Oh yeah, let's advance this way.
Yeah, or forward, backwards,
whatever.
or cha-cha here. There's our agenda, if we will. We're going to walk through all 5 of these pillars. The first half of the conversation will be between myself and Michael, and then we'll pivot to Barry's content to bring us home. And gentlemen, please feel free to augment each other's answers as you see fit.
Thank you.
All right, so without further ado, if you could, Michael, what is an agent really?
Yeah, so, okay. So we all have a general definition of an agent, right? In the before times, we called it a computer program. And so I like to think of it as nothing more than a computer program with a different layer of computation, access to tools, and also something in the environment it's going to learn from. And so before we can even talk about what an agent is, I like to talk about agency in general. And that's what these 5 pillars are. So there's some level of autonomy that this computer program is going to have. And there's a neat slide that we'll show in just a minute talking about our trust versus versus autonomy as well. But planning and reasoning is something that an agentic system will do. And predominantly that's going to be with the kind of computational architecture that we have, as you all know, with generative AI. But this could also be discriminative AI in the mix as tooling. But realistically, planning and reasoning seems to be largely offloaded to these types of generative systems that are sort of the brains of these agents. Humans are agents, of course, and we plan and reason on our own as well, in maybe a different way than the model that we use in the box is, but that's one area. Another area is being reactive and proactive in a particular environment. So being reactive to something like a prompt versus proactive, like taking a prompt, inferring what's meant, and going and finding extra answers, just as an example. Learning and adaptation is also part of a part of what an agentic, or what it means to be an agentic system of some kind or have agency. And so this learning and adaptation changes over time. How we learn, what intelligence is, these are all open questions now in research, in academic research and otherwise. But this is important to know because these agents and agentic systems that we're creating, if we want them to emulate humans and what it means to be human, we have to think about how we learn and adapt before we can truly accept and trust how a non-human-based agentic system will act. And that all is boiled down to how oriented to a goal the agent really is. And so this question of alignment is something that we need to be thinking about in the audience. I do have another polling question.
Yeah, please, fire away, yeah.
So of you all, how many of you work on fine-tuning models or creating models for agents, or not even agents, just generative AI? Do I have any data scientists in the room?
All right.
Okay.
I got one.
Yeah.
Who here is using an agent right now? Like actively? All right, a couple, good.
Okay.
Who here wants to use an agent, and that's why you showed up to this session? Excellent, lots of more hands going up. All right, so we're on the learning curve for most of the audience. So that helps us set the right altitude for the rest of the talk. And so the next question I have for you, Michael, if I could, is what are important factors one needs to consider when using an agent? So most of us aren't in the audience, but want to. So what should they be considering as they go down this path?
Okay, so there was a slide that was out of order, so forgive me for going back. This one right here.
There we go.
So there was an MIT survey that was conducted, and you probably have seen something similar to this, where 19 out of 20 projects fail and fail to make it out of pilot. So I was at MIT a couple of weeks ago working with some scientists and stuff there. And while I was there, it was with the scissor researchers, not the same people who conducted this particular survey. However, the survey really boils down to a couple of things that are of concern if we want to use agents. And one of them is integration is a big problem. So giving any type of software system access to data or information that could be used in a way that is not deterministic is one barrier, but not being able to integrate with those data sources is one big issue. The second big issue with this particular survey and others as well is that culturally, two things. One, there has to be ROI attached to what these agentic systems are going to do. If there's no value, it becomes a science project. And right now, a lot of pressure is being put on boards, it's being put on executives, and it's being put on people like us who are operators within our business trying to bring these things to light. The second thing of the cultural shift is we have to think about new ways to employ these systems. Up until now, all of the software that we've been building has been largely deterministic. And because of that, we have rules. If this condition exists, then do this, otherwise do this other thing, right? And so with that code, we can be very logical and targeted and very explicit on what the outcome is going to be. We also have to have a margin of error when we think of these non-deterministic systems. And so if we're going to introduce a generative type of computational model into a software program, we have to be comfortable with some level of risk and also some level of variance for what our expectation is. And so what that also means is the way that we have done things in the past might not be the best way to solve something.
Go forward.
And so if we're going to use an agentic system, we also have to be comfortable with our deterministic answers not necessarily being the right way to go about solving a problem in a novel way. And so the last thing I'll say just on this one topic as well, the really, really cool thing I think that agents and generative AI brings us is the ability to fail fast. And when we think about failing, to me, that is a feedback loop of learning. And I tell my kids that all of the time. Failure is learning. So as long as you learn from your, whatever happened before, and you update the weights in your head, I don't necessarily say that to them exactly like that, but this is essentially how we're going to learn and adapt in our world. The great thing, I think, about generative systems is that we can fail fast and prototype quickly and move on. The downside is we can fail fast, and if we're putting a lot of weight on what these agents and agentic systems are doing, it can also cause side effects that we don't expect in the business as well. So don't go into production right away.
Barry, something to add?
So is it fair to say then, Mike, that maybe within this 95% statistic, these 19 out of 20 that are failing, let's say, that there's room for AI agents that might do analysis of the failures? to be able to make some of those, or to be able to rectify, maybe even autonomously, some of the failures that happen to have within that 19 of 20 that you find.
Sounds like you're leading the witness, but yeah, I think so. Yeah, so we can use our agents to be able to assess and evaluate failure conditions, race conditions, anything that's going to potentially be deleterious to, to an objective. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Cool. Our next question. Why Boomi for agents?
Right. So for those of you who have built agents so far, have you used open source systems, like open source agent builders? Has anybody used like Salesforce to build an agent? It's okay. I know we're at an AWS conference. It's good.
Okay.
How about AWS? Have you built agents in AWS at this point? It's a pretty good platform. I'll say that. And one thing about Boomi, we're built on top of AWS as well. The idea, though, is that Boomi is really focused not only on agent builds, but on observability and governance of agents. And so a lot of the things that we can do when you make agents, we can give you oversight. And Barry's going to talk a little bit more about this in a bit. But think of it as like when we go to McCarran Airport, or what used to be McCarran, I think it's something else now. But whatever, the airport here in Las Vegas, there's a control tower there, and it's monitoring all of the flight traffic, regardless to which airlines we're talking about. In the same way, our control tower monitors agents of different types, tailing logs, looking at how different agents interact with each other. These are just examples of one thing that we need to do in order to help our customers govern their agentic landscape, whatever that's going to look like. So,
Gotcha.
Yeah, Barry?
Yeah, I mean, if even thinking about autonomous agents and things that will execute, well, autonomously, you start to think about if you didn't have governance, what the implications would be. And, anyone who's seen an autonomous process, or let's say something that didn't have a human in the loop happen, where that can go wrong, just start to think about, well, what happens now if we have some of these agents which, can have a degree of variability. You introduce that into this, agent calling another agent, making choices, how that could potentially go wrong. You really start to understand how a human in the loop is kind of necessary just to make sure or mitigate the risk involved.
So for the audience, help us understand how Boomi is differentiated in this space. So you mentioned a bunch of different providers providing agents and different ways to do it. What's unique about Boomi's approach?
Yeah, so several different things. One is being able to observe agentic behavior and providing governance guardrails, that sort of thing. That's at the agent layer. But the tooling layer is also something that's very interesting as well.
How
and
so?
Well, like creating processes. A business process, like for those of you who are familiar with hire to retire, order to cash, or any type of back office workflow, just as an example, that can be built by whatever integration platform you use. Within our framework, we can turn those into tools. We can turn those into tools via RAG pipeline, MCP. We can do a lot of different techniques to make sure that whatever processes, whatever access to data, whether they're file data, database data, endpoints for APIs, those all get exposed, created, abstracted, whatever the case is, we can make that all useful. The other thing that we can do as well is really separate out what it means to integrate applications and also data. And so what I mean by that is we can validate how different agentic systems are performing their task and compare that with what we think they should do deterministically and bring the human in the loop like you're talking about. And what this does is it allows our users to gain trust from the overall platform. And there's much, much more. And the last thing I'll bring up, and I think is a real big separator from us and others, that is, with Boomi, you create in the cloud and you run wherever you want to. If security is important to you, if privacy is important to you, and your integrations need to, and your tooling needs to abide by whatever processes and whatever policies that you have for your enterprise, with Boomi, you can do the sorts of things to keep your data path separate from the actual design time. Runtime is separate from the design time. So if you're concerned about things like sovereignty, especially as we move into a different geopolitical situation, if you do business internationally outside of the United States in any way, you can install your runtimes anywhere you want to, as many or as few of them as necessary to execute whatever tasks. So those agents in agentic systems would be able to take advantage of the integration features that we have there.
Really allows that
is
flexibility.
Huge flexibility and complete differentiator.
Great.
I have that come up a lot in terms of GDPR. You know, a lot of people have GDPR regulations that they're concerned with, you know, where the data exists, you know, maybe by penalty of, you know, local law. You have a mandate that says your data must exist and must run and must execute and stay within the logical boundaries of that geographic region. So a lot of times, Boomi's runtime, the separation between our runtime and our platform, the fact that the runtime can live anywhere really plays nicely into that concern. So a lot of business comes our way for that reason. The other kind of one thing I'll kind of chime in on is Boomi's vendor agnostic approach. You know, like there's a lot of folks out in the market that kind of do what we do, and they might be tied to a larger company that wants to sell you larger objectives. So not necessarily that the product really is all that bad, because there's a lot of good competitors out there, but their roadmaps will be in service to those larger objectives, the things that they want to sell you, so that the things that their roadmap will express is not so vendor agnostic, whereas Boomi tends to be a very even play field among all of our vendors that we deal with.
Yep.
Awesome. Great. So I've got some history with Boomi, and
A little bit.
What I remember is it being an amazing integration platform, right? Best in the business. And now that we have agents and MCP and all these other techniques, is integration still important?
Yeah. Like this shows, integration is one of the reasons why going from prototype to production is very difficult to do. And without having the proper integration steps, it's hard. I want to redefine what integration actually means, though. There was a time when it meant to take two or more disparate systems, expose APIs or expose a way, an interface to be able to have those systems connect with each other, transform and move data accordingly relative to a process, a service, or something like this. And when I say process, I mean like a business process in our nomenclature. The way that I would define integration now includes a couple of other elements. It does include automation with it, the ability to not only take a manual process and automate pieces of it, but create end-to-end automations, and then also orchestration. So orchestration becomes the element where you can create your programs, your services, your agents, whatever it is, and have full and utter control over the governance of those created assets. And so with that, we need things like the ability to do simple things like ETL or virtual ETL, or the ability to capture changes in data as it flows from a transaction system to an analytical system and back again. The ability to connect in real time or near real time how different systems are interacting with each other and updating the metadata accordingly, and all of the data needs to be where it needs to go. The other thing is APIs, making sure that you can not only expose or create them, but also manage them as well, regardless to what type of API gateway or however many API gateways you have of different flavors and varieties. And the last thing is to adapt to the changes in the AI landscape as they come. So for instance, we were talking about RAG pipelines. Everybody familiar with RAG, retrieval augmented generation? A lot of head nods. Okay, good. And if you're not, this is something that's been really in the market with 19 different architectural types really in the last couple of years. Well, this new technology, MCP, has come along and provided a different way to turn tools into very accessible resources for agents specifically. So model context protocol and context engineering in general has changed and adapted, but we have too. Because we're an integration platform, we're not stuck in older paradigms. We can change and adapt to new technologies that come out. So when we're talking about A to A or any type of agent-to-agent protocol, or any type of north-south protocol like MCP, as an example, we're there. And for people like me who are looking 5 to 10 years down the road, trying to figure out what that future world is going to look like and make sure that we stay consistent with what we have now to the builds then, that's what we do. So an integration platform needs to be modern, flexible, and adaptive.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point, and Boomi's obviously illustrated an ability over the years I've known you to continue to evolve the platform to be able to incorporate and adopt the different changing in protocols or access or governance or whatever happens to be what's next.
Exactly.
Which is great. Barry, you had something to add?
Yeah, it also speaks to, I mentioned before, vendor agnostic. We can be the MCP tools that you use in your agents, even if it was developed on another framework. Or, we support MCP, so you could develop tools on another platform, and we'll accept those tools to be able to be used by the AI agents that you could create using Boomi. The other thing that's worth noting is, I know, Ben, you go way back with the platform, but Boomi it's been around since 2006. So, by reference, this would be around the time that we were using flip phones and Blackberries. Mike probably had a goatee. I had an embarrassing boy band haircut with frosted tips. It was really very tragic. But it was around that time that Boomi came up with this process canvas idea, and it's been very resilient over the last 2 decades. And the reason for it is it's so darn easy to use. Like it is this drag and drop wizard-driven thing that you don't necessarily have to be be a full-scale developer to use. But we've managed to model that approach over the years to be able to do things now, like to have an agent step, to be able to support RAG, to be able to do things with MCP. So in that way, Boomi has evolved to be what it is today.
All right, so we're going to have...
Well, I have one thing I do want to add.
Add away.
So this is about human agency.
Yes.
Right? So I want to bring it back to the human for a second.
Let's do that, because we're all human, right? Here.
So, well, maybe most of you are. I don't know.
You're dicey.
I'm dicey. But honestly, human agency is important to me. So every morning, and this might sound trite, but it's true. When I am researching something for the future, I think about how this technology is going to impact the way I work, the way my kids are going to work, how, if they're going to have jobs, are we all worried about that? Maybe a little bit, It's concerning. These are human concerns, right? How is our society ultimately going to change, and how is the technology that we're going to implement going to be indicative of that? And what I think needs to happen there, and what platforms like ours do, and now many others, is we've talked about these democratic transformations in technology for a long time. And when we democratize technology, we make it accessible for people to use and use well. And the really neat thing about this tech and where we're at in this moment in time is we don't know where the jobs of the future are going to be or where society is going to be. And the accessibility of what agentic types of systems provide is it allows everybody to have access to be a builder. Everybody in here speaks some human language, I would assume.
I would hope so.
Yeah, so, and any of your colleagues who is a non-programmer that speaks the language that you do is now a developer, just like you are. And whether you're a vibe coder, which is popular in today's parlance, or whether you are a seasoned veteran who's been coding for all of her or his life, or their life, it's these worlds are converging in interesting and unique ways. And so platforms like ours make it accessible for the human to actually create a sense of agency within the platform itself. And what's really neat about that, as I'm looking out, I'm thinking, what is your digital twin or digital twins that you're going to be creating as an agent to augment what you do, to change the way you behave, to act on your behalf, knowing what your constraints are? These are all things that are accessible in platforms like ours because we're giving everybody the kind of agency necessary to be able to build the tools that are going to model a future world. So it's up to us to figure out what that is. Right now, super early days, for sure.
It is. And I'll ask another polling question just to get some audience participation. Does anybody here have a part of their job that's not their favorite? Pretty much all of us, right?
I love expense reports.
Yeah, well, there you go. Perfect one, right? Where I see this technology, and especially Boomi's platform, helping us as human beings is finding ways to use the tools, create agents to do the parts of our job that we don't particularly, that are repetitive, that could be automated or have a workflow associated with them, to make our lives genuinely better, right? So freeing up time for all of you to do the parts of your job you do enjoy that probably add more value both to you personally, back to the human, but also to your organization, right? Solving the next problem, being creative, really tapping into what we're great at, which is complex critical thinking as a human being and being creative, solving problems.
Well, I hope you're right about the complex critical thinking bit.
Yeah.
You might have seen some reports lately that we're getting dumber over time.
Depends on who you ask.
It depends on who you ask, but if we cede our critical thinking to another system, this is going to create interesting new challenges that will emerge that we're going to have to solve for those problems as well. My kids, for instance, who are both at university, one very much uses AI, the other one very much does not. I notice a difference in how they think about their world. Not that the one who uses AI doesn't think critically. This person actually that child actually does think very critically. My hope is that we all remember this as we're governing what we're doing in our jobs or whatever we're going to introduce agents into in our day-to-day lives.
Yeah, no, at this, the World Economic Forum did a jobs report last January. I'd encourage those, I see a nod, so good. If you haven't seen it, highly recommend. It's free download, but it has a chart of the skills that are going to be in high demand in 2030, which isn't that far along. But it makes logical sense. A lot of the skills are human skills, critical thinking, learning, influence, communicating, these kinds of things. If you think about it, if we have agents doing the mundane things that we don't want to do, it frees us up to do the things that are uniquely human and therefore will be more valuable. So I encourage your sons and daughters to go review the skills that as parents we want to recommend them seeking. And all of you, as you continue your career development, look at those because you'll see, again, a demand for those human skills are going to come at a higher value, I think, in due course.
Yeah, there's the other thing. I do want a polling question here.
Please.
Do I have any liberal arts people with a liberal arts background in the room?
Not a one. Not
one?
Oh, there's one.
Oh, we got
Excellent.
one.
There's always one.
Outstanding. So I was at Cornell giving a lecture to grad students and undergrads about a month ago. And in the grad student session, room full of engineers, awesome stuff. Different kinds of engineers, top, bright people, all of that sort of thing. We had one lone liberal arts person. And I turned to that person and said, you are going to be doing very well in this new economy. And the reason why is because liberal arts people, I know firsthand, because my undergraduate degree is in liberal arts as well, with German linguistics and international affairs. And then later computer science. But those, in liberal arts, you're taught to think critically, be creative, have novel approaches to things. So it's good. So if your kids are interested in liberal arts, don't shoot them. Yeah, encourage them to go down that path.
It's kind of interesting how we used to place, like an onus on being an idea person, because it kind of made that what you could do, you couldn't do the implementation of it. You just come up with the idea. Now, in this, what you're saying, there's greater value placed on that versus implementation, because now implementation has gotten that much easier.
Well, and from an engineering perspective too, all the engineers that I've worked with, at Penn and like everywhere else that I've been, they're all super creative too. Mm-hmm. Just creativity is going to have a changing and adapting role. It's the critical thinking that we all have. We're going to be able to govern how these agents work, but those are elements of human growth and where agents are going to get better and better over time, or have a chance to get better and better over time.
All right, you just mentioned it, and we're going to ask you to dig in a little deeper to how important is governance, and most importantly, how does Boomi help with governance?
Yeah, so governance means a lot of different things. We talked about autonomy. We talked about an agent and what that is. What I really want to get into, and sorry I'm flipping around here, is this. So there's a newer version of this slide, but this is a 2x2 where I think governance really comes into trust versus autonomy. The more we trust a system, the more we're going to give that system ability to act in the world. And if we just think about us as humans and how we interact with each other, and I don't mean to anthropomorphize agents in general that we are talking about, in this conference, but I'm going to in a little bit just to give us a mental model to work off of. If we think about how we trust a coworker, ourselves, somebody else, our children, to do something, we'll give them more freedom to do that thing. And so at this conference I was at about a month ago, we came up with this matrix, which we have a human in the loop where we've got high trust but low autonomy. We have human on the loop, which is high autonomy but not necessarily high trust at this point. And then the polar opposites. In the upper right-hand corner, this is full autonomy. When we think of like autonomous vehicles, operating here in the Las Vegas area, that would be an example of something that's a trusted agent or an expert system on a manufacturing line. Those are examples of that. In the lower left-hand corner, though, where we refuse as humans to give agency to an agentic system in either context or in production or in processing, this is ripe for disruption. So in other words, if one has manual processes that they're going to do and not willing to cede autonomy, this is going to create a disruptive case. And so what I think will happen at this particular point is that if companies that you're competing against or organizations where you're stifled by not using agents or not moving fast enough you're opening, those types of companies are opening themselves up to disruption. Conversely, we're probably not going to just give the keys of the kingdom to an agent full on for a very, very long time until such time that trust has been established with those agents to do that sort of thing. So the goal is to move from this lower left-hand box into the upper left-hand or the lower right-hand at least, so that we can have the human involved in the governance and processing context provision for that particular agent. And so where we have this today, for instance, is something simple, like a human in the loop. Human provides the context, the agent processes. This would be an example of using, say, a chat system of some kind. You're providing a prompt, it goes out and does the work. You're not doing the work, but largely that is a real thing that we can do today. Human on the loop is something like the agent's going out and finding something and checking in with you to see if that's okay. In our platform, and one of the differentiators is this validation step. So for instance, if you have systems where you've got two different addresses for you, one in your old house that you just lived in, and maybe the new house that you moved to, that needs to be updated by a human. Today we can do this deterministically, but at scale, if agents are going to be determining whether or not there's an A case or a B case or a red case or a blue case or a green case, it needs a human to act as the final arbiter of what's going to happen. That is the case where the human is on the loop in that particular point. So the way that Boomi handles that is we provide all of the tools to be able, to govern this sort of approach, giving humans more trust, allowing humans to see what the agents are doing, and giving more trust in the process for the human to move from this lower left to the other quadrants.
Yeah, Barry.
I think that's particularly valuable when you're talking about anomaly detection. Like let's say that there happens to be an agent that is existing and that you've created, and you want to make sure that you've established a baseline of execution so that any spikes or abnormalities that should occur, that you're detecting, and then providing governance and, like Mike was saying, being that human in the loop that can determine whether either I need to adjust those thresholds or something has legitimately gone wrong and I need to be able to either kill the agent or act responsibly to alter the agent to make this work better.
You know what, I really like this focus on trust and autonomy. Has everybody used an assistant of some kind and had a hallucination of some kind? Everybody? Right? Like it happens, and that can erode trust with the humans or the people who are trying to adopt these systems. And so as practitioners, we've got to find ways to validate and make sure that we're reducing the hallucinations or the times where the system gets it wrong. Otherwise, the adoption of said system is going to not be where we need it to be to solve whatever problem we intended to solve. So I really like this, how you've laid this out, because it is a sliding scale, and you're on it somewhere. And some processes may be in different parts over time, but ideally this gives you a roadmap on how to proceed.
Yeah, and they can move in and out of these stages as well. The other thing, just on the point that you mentioned about trust, and I know Barry's got a lot to say too, the more we trust and the more we cede authority, we also run a risk as well.
Indeed.
Because if these agents are performing at, you talked about hallucination, let's say we get to a stage where an agent is hallucinating less than 1% of the time. That could lull us into submission.
Yeah.
And when that happens, this is exactly where we need to go. Forced autonomy. All right, the agent's going to do all of the automated work, but we're going to need to do some auditing, spot checking, and this sort of thing. And so that's important.
I'm kind of thinking back to that original stat that you have about the 95%. It's probably fair to say that there's a fair percentage in that 95% where AI agents were being asked to do something that probably an AI agent shouldn't be asked to do. Maybe it was just best left as a deterministic process.
Indeed. All right, we're going to pivot now to Boomi's AI story, Barry, if you would. Give us a feel for, at a high level, what that has been.
So Boomi's AI story is really interesting in that you can kind of break it out into three different ways, really, that we've incorporated AI. One is the way in which we enable you to do let's say, AI-related things using Boomi. Like we said that Boomi has a process canvas, allows you to be able to have an orchestration layer, allows you to be able to accomplish your AI objectives within your organization, and even to be able to create agents that could call other agents and call other agents and do things like that. That's fairly rudimentary within Boomi right now. There is the AI that we've built into the tool to make using Boomi a more natural language process thing, so as to democratize innovation, like you were mentioning before, Mike. But then, of course, the thing that's really most interesting for the purposes of this conversation is Agent Studio. In Agent Studio, we provide you with an agent designer so that you can build AI agents using natural language processing. So you could literally come in and say, I'd like to create an agent that does this, this, and this. And then Boomi will use AI to create AI. And it will actually allow a business user to come in and create their own AI agents. It will actually create the disposition of the chat, the chat GPT that you can use. It will go in, create all the tasks, the instructions. You can assign it tooling, so that if that AI agent needs to be able to reference other sources of information, other data sources, other APIs, it will easily enable you to do so. And we also offer you a test harness for being able to test out the AI agents that you create prior to deployment. Now, the other thing that's pretty exciting about that is that from a governance perspective, we provide you with Agent Control Tower. Agent Control Tower allows you a complete look at all of the agents inside of your entire environment. And I said before, Boomi specializes in being vendor agnostic. We don't let you just track agents that are created in Boomi. We also allow you to be able to create and use agents in other systems and have them be tracked in Agent Control Tower. So you get this full ecosystem view, and this little demo here moves pretty quick, but if you see the first screen, it has a bunch of little bubbles on it. Those are agents that are all, each different color represents a different vendor, whether it be ServiceNow, whether it be AWS, whether it be Boomi. We can connect to the frameworks and pull in all of the agents that you happen to create. So it gives you the ability to be able to have monitoring and compliance dashboards. It gives you the ability to be able to kind of see and flag anomalies and even set thresholds for anomalies, so that if anything should go wrong with any agent in your entire ecosystem, you could drill down, you could actually get an introspected look at all of the agents and what they do, and then you can make adjustments as needed. Maybe you need to kill the agent, maybe you need to adjust the thresholds. It gives you a full look at all of the agents, and it could help you eliminate sprawl, agent sprawl, and shadow IT in your organization, because it'll bring to light agents you might not have even known existed.
Yeah, and it's a really good way to get IT and the business aligned as well, just on that note.
That's not important. Just kidding. Just kidding. Barry, can you dive a little deeper into how Boomi helps customers operationalize their data? The AI is only going to be as good as the data it has access to. So how's Boomi helping there?
Yeah, 100%. So Boomi actually, if I could go back here, but you see that we have 4 core tenets within our Boomi Enterprise platform. There's integration and automation, which we've talked about exhaustively. There's data management as well. And data management allows you to be able to cleanse and enrich your data, in essence, to be able to make that data AI ready. So it gives you the ability to be able to take a look at data coming from various different sources, to be able to establish this within a hub and spoke model, the middle of which can establish golden records within Boomi that has the data cleansed, staged, deduped, using fuzzy logic matches if need be, and provide AI-ready data that can feed models or can be used in contextualized prompts and queries to be able to enrich those queries via something like RAG, that you mentioned earlier, RAG being retrieval augmented generation. But the other thing too is that within those 4 pillars we have integration, automation, data management, and we also have API management, because of course we understand the importance of being able to use APIs and access APIs in the agents that you create as well. So Boomi has made a significant investment in being able to bring to light basically an enterprise grade API management platform that is now in the Gartner Magic Quadrant for API management. So I think we're the only vendor actually that can make that claim, where we're in the Magic Quadrant for Gartner for both integration and API management.
Great. All right. So Michael mentioned governance, and you mentioned anomalies. So touch on, Barry, if you would, how Boomi helps both identify anomalies, what kind of anomalies, and then importantly, like what should we be concerned about? Why would there be an anomaly?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different anomalies that can exist within what you're doing. Like we have, and I thought I had a slide here. Nope, I didn't. Okay, so as it turns out, when we're talking about things that can potentially go wrong, it could be total number of invocations. So anything that could alert you as the human to something that could be going wrong with an agent or a set of agents that might be, one agent calling another or making some deterministic path of execution that it shouldn't. And a lot of times within Boomi, even with an Agent Control Tower, we can do things like we can flag total invocations, we can flag errors, we can flag hops, along the route that would indicate that, maybe there's something that has happened that hasn't happened or doesn't usually happen. And in that way, we could do monitoring and reporting, we could do logging, we can even set up Boomi processes that can fix or address those issues, be it either autonomously or with a human in the loop to do so.
Yeah, there's some other stuff we'll add too. Also following the prompt and sequence of executions for a reasoning model. So, inside of the designer, we're using a Claude or an Anthropic family of models. Pretty soon it's going to be bring your own as well. That's for next year, which will be great. The key here is the prompts that we as humans use to govern or to create or kick off a process. Those need to be followed, and all of the steps that an agent is doing to being able to grab data, what the source data is, all of that is logged. And so when you can see all of the actions of the agent, and if it is commensurate to the governance guardrails that you put in to your framework, this is how you're going to know when everything is going right. And when it's not, then there are flags that are sent out and or stoppages that will happen so the agent can't move forward.
Yeah, I've seen IT operations actually agents that have been made to basically examine logs for anomalies just for that purpose, just to be able to flag just anomalous sets of execution in logs. So you can use AI agents to basically keep AI agents in line.
All right, so we all work for companies, and so why don't we make this real and give some real-world examples? You just touched on one of the logs, but let's explore some of the real-world examples and business outcomes that agents are impacting.
Yeah, so I was looking actually at this slide in particular. We kind of glossed over this one. But here you see, this is kind of a busy slide, but you get to see all the different kind of things that you can use and create agents and what people have used agents for, whether they be personal assistants, coding assistants, chatbots, summaries. As far as how I've seen customers use Boomi AI agents, like I've seen reporting, financial reporting, that's a big one, where people, if you're doing expense reports, you want to be able to flag
There you go.
what should be thresholds in expense reporting. Even in Boomi, we happen to use something called ChatB, which actually allows us to be able to make queries, for internal folks within Boomi, so that they're not going out to ChatGPT to query things, but they want to get Boomi-specific knowledge and drill down very deep within Boomi to be able to get it. We use our own personal RAG implementation within that for our own internal GPT operations that we're using. Did you have?
Yeah, I definitely did. So we also do these agentic workshops for enterprises as well. And in there are, as you see down in the bottom, we go from the knowledge base type of use case that Barry was just talking about to something that's very focused on certain industries as well. One of them is in accounting. One of the projects that we're working on now is saving 27,000 hours of human time in order to do reconciliation between invoices and payments. Every company has this problem.
Yep.
The degree to which manual processes are involved in that, in most companies, is high.
Yep.
And so one of the areas that this could be a quick and big win for with very minimal risk, which is what I would advise any first agent out the door to do, is that one. That reconciliation process can be tricky depending on how many child companies your parent might have. But in general, if you're looking for a quick win with a lot of payout, that's a big one.
What are some other areas that you guys have seen, quick realization of value?
Actually, one thing I wanted to kind of do before we even answer that is I wanted to show for Mike's group for a minute, because they offer like one-day workshops where literally Boomi will come in, take a look at your business, be able to offer you complete one-day workshops where you can get hands-on using Boomi, creating agents, solving your problems, and then creating what would be a roadmap for how you can use AI agents in your business and how Boomi can help you get there. So if you happen to be one of those people that happened to raise your hand earlier and was looking for some guidance in regards to ideas you may have, but you really don't know where to go to get there, this is a great one-day workshop. Put that down on your list of things to do. Reach out to either Mike Bachman or myself. I'm Barry.Gertzen at Boomi.com, and request one of these workshops, and we'd be happy to set you up and come in. They're completely free, and we have a mandate to be able to do quite a bit of them. So,
Excellent. Any other quick hits, or Michael, from these workshops that are notable that had that light bulb moment for a customer?
Yeah, so the quick wins, that are something that's going to be a knowledge base type of win as well. We went from prototype to production inside of Boomi using ChatB within several months. But the prototype was literally 2 days to be able to create that. And going through security, going through governance checks, going through validation of different models that were used, updates on RAG pipelines, that's what takes the time. And it's just making sure that you get enough eyes on the particular problem early on. So, but these types of knowledge base systems are really good ones for good, wholesome wins. The problem is the ROI is hard to define there. Whereas in these other types of reconciliations, if we go to finance and we go to accounting, these are where we can start to pick up some real wins. And so in these workshops, we're not just bringing in IT folks, we're bringing in line of business operators and executives. And if an executive can build an agent and then start to think about her problem as it pertains to her day-to-day,
Broadly, yeah.
all of a sudden doors open up. And now it's not about determining how to build a piece of software. It's like, how do I solve this particular persnickety problem that has been elusive for so long? Can an agent help me solve that? Let's go and fail fast if it can't, but let's iterate on this and see how well it can work. And that has been going over really well.
I like that a lot. All right, so a lot of our attendees at reInvent are part of a company that has some software that faces out to customers. And so how is AI and agents being incorporated into the UI to make their software, their service more effective and efficient?
So within Boomi, one of the things that we have done in the past and that we're actually expanding, and I'll tell you how we're expanding in a moment, but one of the things that we offer, and I do a lot of work on the OEM side, that's the reason why you see my sample application here, is called OEM Plus. But it's called Embed Kit, and what it allows you to do is it allows you to be able to create your integrations in Boomi, and then be able to, if you had one-to-many customers, you can actually give them a curated marketplace of the integrations that you intend for them by easily just dropping in either vanilla JS or React components that we give you that allow you to be able to just surface an interface kind of like you see here. So imagine your application with these JS components inputted into it that allow you to be able to give people easy ways, and this would be tailored toward business users, to be able to self-service their own integrations. So you just basically give them last mile configuration details to be able to provide integrations. Now, that's something that we've been providing people the ability to do. It's highly popular, but we've since expanded it to also include AI agents. So you see an example here where if what you want to do is you have an idea for an agent, once again, you can use Boomi's Agent Studio to be able to, use natural language to create the AI agent, and then to be able to just drop these React or JS components into your application, and it gives your users an easy way to consume the AI agent that you've created inside of your application. So you can get up and running inside of a week doing something like this, and it gives you an easy way to offer AI to your customers. So if this is something that's interesting, again, it's barry.gertzen@boomi.com.
And those are governed agents too, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So.
Yeah, the nice thing about one part of that agent creation process is that we include guardrails, so that it is secure. Like we can actually make sure, during the wizard that we guide you through to be able to create AI agents, that you can go through and you can say things like, use a regex expression that would be a social security number, so that the agent knows not to put any, sensitive information to the screen. You can also warn on content. You can warn on subject, so as to keep your agents from doing things that they really shouldn't be doing, or to be misappropriated to do something they shouldn't be doing.
All right, Barry, can you tell us a bit about MCP and what it is and how Boomi, enables it, or how Boomi interacts with MCP?
Sure. So MCP stands for Model Context Protocol, and it is a way for you to be able to converse and to be able to reach out to tools in a standard way. So let's say that you were creating an AI agent, and you needed an AI agent to have the proper information that it needed, but that information comes from some external system, and you didn't necessarily know how to be able to get that information. What that external information can be offered up as is an MCP tool, and Boomi supports both the ability to act as a gateway for these MCP tools. So anything within Boomi that you saw before, whether it happens to be an integration, whether it happens to be an API, whether it happens to be a data record, any of those things can be offered up as an MCP tool, because within our API management tool, you can literally flick a switch and it becomes an MCP server that allows you to serve out Boomi capabilities for your AI agents that may be created either in Boomi or not in Boomi. Again, we are very vendor agnostic. Nice thing about this is it gives you a standard way to be able to offer your AI agents the information that it needs to be effective.
Outstanding. All right, so as we wrap things up, we've got 5 minutes left. I want to go start with Michael, and then we'll end with Barry. Just words of advice to our audience on how to get started if they haven't started, and any best practices to be successful.
Yeah, the first thing is build in time to failure for yourself. Really play around with agents. Really understand whatever ecosystem that you're using today. It's super helpful to get hands-on and really not be afraid of the tech. And this room is probably not that, so you're probably out there and doing all sorts of things aggressively. One thing that I can say is this is a fast-moving market, and things are changing pretty readily.
Today.
We have today, things already changed today. They're approaching, I think we might be close to 5 million models, actual generative AI models out there. Everybody, all databases or many databases now offer the ability to accept vector embeddings and store those and have those retrievable. MCP and other agentic protocols are springing up all over the place. And the important thing is to stay ahead of all of this, but adopt the platforms or consider platforms, whether it's ours or somebody else's, that are adaptive to the changes that are coming. And so get the hands dirty, come over and see us at the booth. We're at the Venetian, and learn more is a good first step. And I'm also going to bring in the human element again, because this is critical. When we're thinking about the future of the systems that we want to create to make our lives better at work or make society better truly, it's important to understand what the limits of these particular tools are. There are camps which say that you can do everything with agents and just dive in. I caution that if that's your approach. I would say from a human perspective, what I would want is to engage as your level of understanding increases and knowing what the limits of agents are or agentic systems are, what the limits of these models are, how to use these models in conjunction with each other in order to achieve outcomes, how to ensure and guaranteed structured output so that you can have better overall goal resolution at the end. These are the types of things that we need to do as practitioners. And for those of you who are model creators in the room, there's going to be wild changes coming there. In a keynote.
Yeah, we're going to help.
AWS is doing a lot with that, like neuromorphic systems in general, abstractions, the way that humans visualize information and context. This is not available in LLMs today. Right. So getting to AGI, probably, I don't know where you stand on that, but from my point of view, probably not going to get to this supermodel with a super world view at our current state. And so what that means is there's going to be changing in adaptive technology. And if those things can have APIs that we can expose or automate, we can also govern them with the right tools as well. So as we as humans try to emulate what we do, the processes that we have, the biases that we want to remove from all of our systems, all of those sorts of things require heavy governance and a good platform that's adaptive. So what I would say is come check us out.
Love it. Barry?
Yeah, I mean, you said a lot of good things in there, Mike, but I'll also add, choose a framework. I think like a lot of times a framework will just provide you with the ease of use, all of the kind of capabilities and the things that you should look for that we've talked about over the last hour. A lot of that stuff's going to be built in, and it doesn't have to be Boomi. We'd very much like it if it was, but if it's not, you could choose something like AWS. You could choose one of the other vendors out there. But I think you'll find, the ability to fail fast will happen better and easier, with a framework if you're going that route with it. The other thing I would once again encourage you to do is to seek out one of those kind of workshops that I was talking about to get your hands dirty with it if you haven't so far. It's a great way to start. Like it will kind of take down your learning time to what would be, by a factor of 10, I would say, just by devoting one day to it, because you'll just get all the tips, the tricks, all the things that we've learned over the benefit of the last several years. We'll be able to impart that knowledge upon you.
Get the business and IT all better aligned around this as well.
Yep.
All right. Gentlemen, thank you so very much. Everyone, if you would, give a round of applause for my esteemed guests.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks to all of you as well.